The American dream is often spoken about as if it were a natural law, something timeless, something almost biological, as if the moment you are born in this country, the system quietly leans in your favor, waiting to reward effort, patience, and good behavior. But the American dream was never a law of nature. It was a story, and like every powerful story, it was carefully designed, carefully repeated, and extremely profitable for the people who told it. At its core, the American dream promises a simple equation: work hard, play by the rules, and life will move upward. Not dramatically, not overnight, but steadily. Each generation a little better than the last, each year a little more secure. That promise shaped how people planned their lives. It shaped when they married, when they had kids, how much debt they were willing to take on, how long they were willing to wait. It wasn't just an idea, it was a roadmap. And for a period of time, that roadmap aligned with reality just enough to feel true. Wages rose alongside productivity. Housing was accessible. Education actually expanded opportunity instead of delaying it. One income could support a family. Stability wasn't a fantasy, it was normal. That alignment gave the dream credibility. But credibility is not the same thing as permanence. What most people don't realize is that the American dream did not survive because it kept working. It survived because it adapted. When the economic foundation shifted, the story didn't change its destination. It changed its language. Security became flexibility. Stability became opportunity. Guarantees became potential. Risk was quietly transferred from institutions to individuals, while responsibility was loudly transferred to your mindset. That shift matters, because when outcomes stop matching effort, a system has two choices. It can redesign itself, or it can redesign the narrative. The American dream chose the narrative. This is where it stops being inspirational and starts being marketing. Marketing doesn't need outcomes. It needs belief. It doesn't need everyone to win. It needs everyone to keep playing. The American dream was never about ensuring success for the majority. It was about maintaining participation even when success became statistically unlikely. As long as people believed they were just one promotion, one purchase, one mindset shift away from making it, they would keep consuming, keep borrowing, keep working, and keep blaming themselves when it didn't happen. The brilliance of the dream is that it personalized failure. If you didn't make it, the system didn't fail you. You failed the system. You didn't budget well enough. You didn't network enough. You didn't hustle hard enough. You chose the wrong major. You didn't adapt fast enough. Structural problems were reframed as personal shortcomings. That framing didn't just protect the system, it actively strengthened it. Because once people internalize failure, they stop demanding change. Notice how rarely the American dream is discussed in concrete numbers. You're told stories, not statistics, anecdotes, not averages, individual success, not population trends. You see the person who bought a house at 30, not the millions who never will. You hear about the entrepreneur who started with nothing, not the structural advantages quietly supporting them. This isn't accidental. Numbers expose patterns. Stories hide them. Marketing thrives on exceptions because exceptions keep hope alive. The dream also relies on time as a pressure mechanism. It will pay off eventually. You're still young. Give it a few more years. Time keeps people compliant. It encourages patience in systems that are actively deteriorating. It delays reckoning. By the time people realize the payoff isn't coming, they've already invested decades of labor, debt, and identity into the belief. Walking away feels impossible, not because the dream still works, but because leaving it feels like admitting you wasted your life. That's not motivation. That's emotional lock-in. And the more the dream fails to deliver, the more aggressively it is marketed. Side hustles explode when wages stagnate. Financial gurus multiply when security disappears. Apps, courses, coaches, and systems promise to unlock what the economy no longer provides. Each product implies the same thing: the dream still works. You're just missing the secret. That implication keeps people buying solutions instead of questioning the structure. The American dream doesn't collapse when people are struggling. It collapses when people stop believing their struggle is temporary. This is why exhaustion is not a flaw in the system. It's a feature. Tired people don't zoom out. They don't connect dots. They don't analyze historical trends or power dynamics. They survive. They cope. They scroll. They work overtime. They blame themselves. Exhaustion narrows perspective. And narrow perspective keeps narratives intact. When you're exhausted, hope feels urgent, and urgent hope is easy to sell. By the time someone begins to suspect that the American dream may not be broken but intentionally misaligned, the idea itself feels almost taboo. Questioning it feels ungrateful, unpatriotic, lazy. That emotional resistance didn't appear by accident. The dream was tied to morality, to identity, to worth. If the dream is false, then what does that say about everyone who didn't make it? The system relies on that discomfort to protect itself. Because once you separate worth from outcome, the entire narrative starts to unravel. And that's where the real danger begins for the system. Once you step outside the emotional frame of the American dream, something uncomfortable becomes visible. The dream does not describe an economy. It describes a behavior model. It tells people how long to tolerate instability, how much debt to accept as normal, how much risk to internalize without pushing back. It trains patience in a system that increasingly monetizes delay. Delay of comfort, delay of ownership, delay of rest, delay of security. The promise is always future-oriented because the present no longer supports it. That future orientation is critical. A system that cannot deliver now must sell tomorrow. The American dream survives not because it delivers outcomes, but because it keeps redefining when those outcomes are supposed to arrive. Homeownership moves from your 20s to your 40s. Retirement shifts from 65 to whenever you can. Stability becomes something you earn after decades of volatility. And when people struggle under that weight, the narrative reframes it as resilience, as character building, as proof that you're doing it the hard way, which somehow makes it noble. But nobility does not pay rent. Marketing always works best when it disguises itself as values. The American dream was embedded into education, culture, and media so deeply that it stopped feeling like persuasion and started feeling like truth. From childhood, people are taught that success is linear and personal, that effort compounds naturally, that the market rewards merit. These ideas sound reasonable in isolation, but together they create a powerful illusion that outcomes are primarily the result of individual behavior, not system design. That illusion is incredibly efficient. It removes pressure from institutions and places it squarely on individuals. If wages stagnate, you need a better strategy. If housing becomes unaffordable, you need to relocate, compromise, or hustle more. If healthcare costs explode, you need better insurance or better savings. Every systemic failure is converted into a personal optimization problem, and optimization problems never end because the target keeps moving. This is why the American dream pairs so well with productivity culture. Productivity keeps people focused on micro-efficiency instead of macro structure. If you can just manage your time better, budget smarter, work harder, you won't need to question why the rules changed in the first place. The dream doesn't collapse when people work harder. It collapses when they ask why the work stopped paying off, and that question is increasingly difficult to suppress. For the first time in generations, large numbers of people are doing everything they were told and still moving backward, not stagnating. Backward, working more hours for less security, paying more for less access, saving diligently while watching purchasing power erode. This creates cognitive dissonance, and cognitive dissonance demands resolution. The system offers one resolution: self-blame. If the American dream were openly acknowledged as outdated, it would require systemic accountability. Wage structures would be questioned, housing policy would be scrutinized, debt-based education would be challenged. Instead, the narrative doubles down on personal responsibility, not because it's accurate, but because it's stabilizing. A population that blames itself is far easier to manage than one that demands structural change. Marketing doesn't lie outright. It reframes reality just enough to keep people compliant. Notice how success stories are framed today. They are rarely about stability. They're about escape, quitting your job, beating the system, finding a loophole, passive income, early retirement. These stories implicitly admit the system doesn't work for most people, while simultaneously suggesting the solution is individual cleverness, not collective change. The dream mutates from everyone can succeed to anyone can succeed, which sounds similar but is fundamentally different. Everyone implies structure. Anyone implies lottery. And lotteries are excellent at keeping people hopeful while extracting value. The American dream also benefits from comparison. Social media didn't create envy, but it industrialized it. When people see curated success constantly, their own struggle feels like a personal lag, not a structural trend. They don't see the median outcome. They see the highlight reel. Marketing thrives in that gap because aspiration sells better than reality. Meanwhile, the economic floor quietly dissolves, safety nets thin, costs harden, flexibility replaces protection, risk is normalized, instability is rebranded as freedom, and people are told to be grateful for the opportunity to navigate it. This is where the dream becomes dangerous, not because it's false, but because it delays adaptation. People build lives around assumptions that no longer hold. They take on debt expecting future income that never materializes. They delay rest, waiting for security that never arrives. They accept burnout as temporary, even when it's structural. The longer the belief persists, the harder the landing becomes. And when people finally realize the dream isn't coming back, the emotional fallout is severe. It's not just financial disappointment, it's identity shock. If you did everything right and still lost ground, what does that mean about the rules you trusted? About the sacrifices you made? About the years you postponed living? This is why the American dream isn't just an economic myth. It's a psychological anchor. Removing it too abruptly creates panic. So instead of being dismantled, it's slowly diluted, softened, rebranded, turned into motivation content rather than policy expectation. But motivation cannot replace structure. And the longer the dream is used to paper over systemic reality, the more fragile the system becomes. Because belief can delay consequences, but it cannot eliminate them. Eventually, enough people notice the pattern. Enough people compare notes. Enough people stop asking, "What did I do wrong?" and start asking, "Who does this actually work for?" That question is where the marketing fails. Because marketing cannot answer it honestly. At the deepest level, the American dream survives because it is useful. Not useful to the people chasing it, but to the people who benefit from them chasing it. The dream keeps labor cheap, debt acceptable, and frustration individualized. It channels ambition downward instead of upward. Instead of asking why the system concentrates wealth so aggressively, people ask how they can personally climb within it. That redirection of energy is incredibly valuable. Debt sits at the center of this arrangement. The dream normalizes debt as the price of entry. Education debt to qualify, housing debt to belong, consumer debt to keep pace. None of it framed as a warning, all of it framed as progress. Once debt is normalized, risk is privatized. If something goes wrong, the institution is protected, but the individual absorbs the shock. The dream doesn't collapse under debt, it runs on it. This is why the American dream never emphasizes ownership without leverage. True ownership creates independence. Leveraged ownership creates obligation. Mortgages, student loans, credit cards, car payments. These aren't just financial tools. They are behavioral anchors. They keep people working jobs they hate, tolerating conditions they wouldn't otherwise accept, and postponing change indefinitely. You don't need to threaten someone who is already afraid of missing a payment. Marketing understands this psychology perfectly. It doesn't sell chains as chains. It sells them as milestones. You're building credit. You're investing in yourself. You're securing your future. Each phrase sounds responsible, even noble. And once people internalize that framing, they will protect their obligations at all costs, even when those obligations are draining their lives. The dream also depends on inequality being invisible. It focuses attention on individual effort while quietly ignoring starting positions. Two people can work equally hard and end up in radically different places. But the dream insists the difference must be personal. Background, timing, access, health, geography, these are minimized or ignored. Not because they're unimportant, but because acknowledging them would undermine the story. And stories matter more than facts in systems that rely on belief. This is why the American dream is reinforced culturally, even as it fails economically. Movies, ads, speeches, and slogans keep repeating the same message long after the conditions that supported it are gone. The narrative becomes nostalgia, and nostalgia is powerful because it feels comforting even when it's misleading. People don't want to believe they're chasing something obsolete. They want to believe they're just early. But systems don't care about belief. They care about incentives. As long as the dream keeps people working, borrowing, consuming, and competing with each other instead of questioning the structure, it will be defended. Not openly, not aggressively, but subtly. Through silence, through reframing, through endless reminders that success is still possible if you just try a little harder. The most revealing moment comes when someone stops believing. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly. They stop chasing symbols of success that no longer deliver security. They stop tying their self-worth to productivity. They stop measuring their life against a moving finish line. That moment is terrifying at first because the dream provided meaning. But it is also liberating because it restores perspective. Without the dream, you begin to see the system more clearly. You notice how much effort is required just to stand still, how often rules change after commitments are made, how frequently risk is shifted downward and reward upward. You realize that many of your struggles were not evidence of personal failure, but predictable outcomes of a system optimized for extraction, not stability. This realization doesn't instantly make life easier. It doesn't cancel debt or lower prices or shorten workdays, but it changes the direction of blame. And that matters more than most people realize. A system can survive anger. It can survive resentment. It can even survive protest. What it cannot survive indefinitely is widespread clarity. Clarity dissolves myths. Clarity exposes incentives. Clarity turns private frustration into shared understanding. That is why the American dream is rarely challenged directly. It's easier to let it fade quietly while keeping its assumptions intact. It's easier to let people think they personally missed something than to admit the rules were rewritten without consent. But once enough people recognize the dream as a marketing campaign rather than a promise, its power weakens. The slogans stop motivating, the guilt stops working, the shame loses its grip, and in that space, new questions become possible. Questions like, what does a stable life actually require? Who benefits from constant insecurity? Why is exhaustion treated as normal? Why is survival framed as success? These questions don't have simple answers and they aren't comfortable, but they are necessary because a dream that requires people to ignore reality in order to believe in it is not a dream worth chasing. The American dream didn't fail you. It did exactly what it was built to do. It motivated behavior, justified outcomes, and protected the system that created it. The failure was believing it was a guarantee instead of a campaign. Once you understand that, you're no longer trying to win a game that was never designed for everyone to win. You're free to decide what success actually means to you, independent of a story that no longer serves the people who believed in it most. And that quiet decision to stop letting a marketing narrative define your worth is the beginning of something far more honest than the dream ever was.